decade period insofar as the emotional terms might have defined it, rather than beginning a new decade. And so our transitions were off, and I thought, this is a little odd. I wonder if that's true of many decades, and if I've just sort of not really been paying attention until now. And it did turn out to be true, and indeed I hadn't been paying attention. So I started to pay attention to it, and I thought, well, around 94, 97, I started getting into the computerized aspect of it, thinking we ought to be able to pick up the emerging emotional flavor of the 90s. And sure enough, we did, which was, basically greed or whatever, the boom years. Yeah. And I did okay. I profited with that in the sense that I had small little stock investments and so on, and was able to tell in advance of when the emotional mood was going to shift. And figured it would shift big because everything about the 90s was excessive. And so I figured that the shift would be excessively short, which it was. Turned out that the crash was pretty quick. And so I started going on this idea of emotional building periods and emotional release periods.
Right.
At fractal kind of levels, folded within themselves, but a repeating pattern. You have to understand that my background, or perhaps my highest level of achievement within my checkered history as an employee of various corporations, has been that of a design pattern fellow. You might find them labeled as software engineers or system architects, this kind of thing. And what I used to do was to discover hidden design patterns within the problems which the coders faced that would allow a basic algorithm or approach to be developed at a low level, which would suffice all the way through massive amounts of code. Thus, the whole program worked on the same metaphor, if you will.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does very, very much so.
Okay, so I just applied that same basic skill of looking for things and decided how one would go about looking for these emotional trends. And lo and behold, they were there.
In your research on those levels, Clif, do you usually or can you come up with dates? I know
I can assign dates, and then that's when we start getting a little screwy.
Right.
Because the emotional release period, for instance, we could not assign a specific date or to an event that turned out to be Katrina, because, for instance, Katrina really as a disaster event did not happen in the course of a single day. It was like a 10-day event.
Oh, right. Sure.
So under those circumstances, if we acknowledge that there may be a day when a trigger event happens, but that the release that followed or the building period that followed will take some time but will express a flavor of that trigger event, we can get occasionally fairly good with dates.
Interesting, because in most areas, historically, psychics do not come up with dates. They come up with a sequence of events. But I remember when the runs were forecasting an event which turned out to be 9/11, it was pretty exact, as I recall.
Well, it wasn't as exact as all of that. It was that we had initially said that it was going to happen within a 90-day period for sure, and it was most likely within a 60-day period, and that's when we started airing. Bear in mind that we brought this out in like July 12th, and we said that we were like 85% sure it would happen. I was 85% sure it would happen within this 60-day period within the following 90 days, and because of the way things shaded out, I was actually thinking that was going to happen around August 19th. That had the highest probability point.
And yet when you're literally in an event that dramatic, only a few weeks off, that's kind of incredible.
It really scared me.
I guess it would.
Shocked me to my core.
I believe it. I absolutely believe, because look at some of the information, Clif, that you've come up with, some of our economic forecasts, meaning up and down trends, and you have been so right on. It's fantastic.
I just got a couple of tips today from some of my clients for services rendered. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share that?
Oh, they're nice guys, and I don't accept donations. If people send me money that way, I have a tendency to pass it on because I don't want the universal karma associated with that. Yeah. But I do occasionally, because some of our clients are high rollers, if you will. Yeah. When they make a big packet of money, they feel guilty if they don't send me a few dollars. In this case, I got enough to help start the repairs on my main bit of transportation here.
Oh my gosh. One of your subscribers, Nancy, just wrote in and she says a couple of reports ago there were numerous references to the sun, including sun disease. What do you see now for the influence of the sun for the next 9 months?
It's very unusual in terms of what we're now picking up in actual, if you will, bespoke language. Okay?
Okay.
There's two different kinds of language we talk about relative to the work we do. The underlying language that's hidden by our emotional context, and then the actual times that the words for an emotional context themselves are used. So, in other words, if we were discussing euphemisms for the word fear, then we'd be talking about the first kind of language, but when people actually come on out and say, well, geez, I'm afraid of this, they're actually using a bespoke word for fear. And what we're now getting is a lot of the language that is being used out and about, if you will, in plain sight in scientific circles, has crossed over or is crossing over from the hidden context of emotional anxiety that leaks through, if you will, reading between the lines, as opposed to actual statements of, geez, I'm afraid of this. And a lot of them are starting to say, I'm afraid of the sun. And basically, if you'll note, have a look at your local newscasts. Whenever they have a chance to, on local TV, capture images of the sun in your area, you'll find that new phenomena are starting to emerge in how they display that sun on your TV screen that are not due to changes in technology, but are indeed due to changes in the way the sun is affecting our existing technology.
Clif, in looking at, let's say, a situation like that where the fear truly is being created, does this negativity, if you can tell, is there any one specific area where it's coming from more than any other place?
You mean like a specific scientific discipline or a geographic area?
Well, both. Okay, that's interesting. How about both? Can you tell?
I know that we have actually we can be somewhat more specific. We can say that there's a number of geographic areas in which scientific curiosity about the sun is on a huge upward swing. Those areas happen to include Iran, India, Pakistan to a certain extent, as a fallout from some of the stuff being done in India, China, Australia, and Brazil.
That's odd.
But they are all experiencing serious impacts from the sun.
Like what, compared to, let's say, what we get here?
There appears that we're dealing with at least some discussion in some of the circles with a different kind of solar energy, if you will, either in amplitude or frequency. We don't know yet. It's either a new kind of ultraviolet, an ultraviolet D, if you will, or it's ultraviolet at an intensity that we have yet to recognize. Plus, we now have a situation emerging where plasma energies are being detected, or at least the indicators we use are showing as though plasma energy is being output from the sun, but we're not having periods of solar flares or particular excited solar activity.
Is it happening more in those areas that you? I mean, because that's quite
more immediate impact on those populations that live closer to the Earth. So, for instance, the reason it's arising in Brazil has to do with the spontaneous bursting into flame of large areas of now rapidly drying out Amazonian vegetation, as well as new problems with the top canopy of the jungle. In many areas that might still have water, the top canopy is wilting. And this has never been seen before.
Jeez. How do you read that, Clif? What can you foresee coming upon us if it's happening in those areas? I mean, spontaneous fires erupting in the jungle, where obviously they've decimated so much of it. But then, how would that compare, let's say, to Iraq, Iran, India? Again, because they live so close to the Earth.
Correct. Many of the places we find have a common denominator in that they are dependent on scarce resources. That is to say, water, because they're rice dependent. And it's unlike growing crops like maize or rapeseed or something. With rice, you have to have that layer of water. If you've got a higher degree of solar radiation, the evaporation starts to suddenly stress what was already a delicate balance.
Sure. My gosh. scary is not even the word when it starts to come down like that. How can you tell? Because I know you will tap into maybe 66 million sites.
Yeah, we get 66 million or greater reads. The reads might cover anywhere from 1 million sites to 18 million. It's somewhat non-deterministic, and I want to keep it that way.
Okay. How do you know, and if it makes a difference, how do you know if so many of them are just pure BS, disinformation, or misinformation? How do you know?
We don't read them consciously. We don't really care what people are saying to each other. In other words, I happen to know that there's some bespoke references of fear associated with the sun because I've got a little filter set on that kicks out some of this stuff to me. But our processing doesn't care. What it does is it goes out and it reads a conversation.
Right.
And for instance, we might tell it that the conversation must have the following. It must have a subject under discussion that is outside the bounds of the site at which it is found. And usually we're talking discussion boards, message boards, those kind of things. But you have to understand that we're after stuff that changes. We don't care. For instance, like it would never, our web bots, for instance, wouldn't read my site because I never really post anything on a daily basis.
Okay.
There's not enough churn there to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Okay, so once read, it's good forever, really. So what we're after is those places that are very high churn. And I've got like a list of maybe 100,000, 200,000 of the hottest in terms of churn global message boards, and it goes in and reads all the public postings there. And what it's looking for is things where, for instance, in a garden discussion, it would be understandable to find references to the sun, and it picks those up, and if we have a sun entity under development within the run, it'll grab all of those references. But they won't be flagged as high, even though the people that are putting them out there are more sensitive, and thus are going to speak about it on a conscious level with some greater understanding. It's much more meaningful for us to find that sun reference appearing in a telephone lineman or telephone lineman / repair forum, and showing up relating to an emotional thing where a guy says basically, what am I running into here? All of a sudden I got plastic degradation like mad. Is the sun causing this?
My gosh.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
The difference.
Cliff, have you found any indication, and this is a question from one of the listeners, in reference to the status of the sun reaching a point on the photon belt where the coronal reactions have changed?
We pick that up all the time.
Oh, okay.
And there's nothing I can do about that level of scientific data because even though we get it, and to a certain extent it's just put into a bin and we sort through it and look at it in a human fashion later on just to see if it doesn't tie into things that are coming up at the emotional level.
Jeez.
In other words, the information is changing, but there you actually have to get into using your discriminating mind to decide, is this accurate? Is it disinformation? What's its source? What's the validity of source? And do these guys know what they're doing? And even if they know what they're doing, are they telling us exactly how they're doing it and reporting correctly and faithfully, or do they have some other agenda? And we don't really go there. The world's just so chock full of people trying to run their own little conspiracies. You spend all of your time chasing